Hello everyone, good morning and a very warm welcome to our webinar today, Sick Pay Made Simple for Sage 50 Payroll. My name's Duncan, I'm your host and presenter for this session, and I am joined by my colleagues Alice and Paddy, who are both standing by in the background, ready and waiting for your questions. Let's now look at what we're going to cover in the webinar. So we're going to begin with a brief introduction covering some of the legislation around statutory sick pay. And then we're going to move on into a demonstration, starting with how to record sickness in Sage 50 Payroll. And I'm going to show you a couple of different ways that you can do this. Once the sickness is recorded, we'll show you where the statutory sick pay is calculated, and then we'll move on to how to adjust your employees' payments. So we'll be looking at the Make Up Basic feature or adjusting pay manually to account for the SSP and the period of absence. And we're going to finish the session with a quick section on troubleshooting with 5 areas to check when an issue arises. And we have a little quiz at the end for multiple choice questions for you to join in with if you would like to, just as a bit of a knowledge check. So that's what we have in store for you. Let's get straight on with our introduction to statutory sick pay. So what is SSP? Well, SSP stands for Statutory Sick Pay, and it's paid to employees when they are ill and unable to work. You may pay your employees more than this if you have a company sick pay scheme, but the statutory sick pay is the minimum amount you need to pay to qualifying employees whilst they're off sick. Now, the rate of statutory sick pay is a weekly rate. It's currently £109.40 per week for a period of incapacity for work of up to 28 weeks. And that's the current rate for the 2023 to 24 tax year. And that will increase with effect from the 6th of April as we move into the new tax year. Now, we've linked to our support guide where you can read more about statutory sick pay, but I'm going to quickly run through some of the qualifying conditions and the general rules of the SSP scheme. So in order for an employee to qualify for SSP, they must have an employment contract with you and have done some work under that contract. So if you've just taken on an employee and they've rang in sick before they've done any work, they would not meet that qualifying condition. They must also have been sick for 4 or more days in a row, and that can include non-working days, and this is known as a period of incapacity for work, or PIW for short. And you'll hear PIW quite a lot in the session today. So 4 or more days in a row to qualify. They need to be earning an average of at least £123 per week. So that is the current lower earnings limit for national insurance. And that average is taken in the 8-week period prior to the first day of sickness, or any periods they have worked if they've worked for less than 8 weeks. And finally, they need to give you the correct notice that they've been off sick and proof of illness when needed. So that proof would be what's now known as a fit note, a statement of fitness for work. If a sickness lasts more than 7 days, you can ask for proof of illness. But if it's a sickness 7 days or less, an employee will be able to self-certify their own sickness. So there's more information about the eligibility and what to do if the employee doesn't qualify, following the link to the gov.uk website there on the slide. A few general rules around SSP. So the SSP payment itself is only for qualifying days. So those are your employees' normal working days or contracted working days. You would pay SSP on the employee's normal pay date. The first 3 qualifying days are known as waiting days, and there is no SSP payable for those first 3 days. So when an employee first goes off sick, they would receive SSP from the 4th qualifying day of that absence. The exception being if it's a linked PIW. So that is when there's a period of sickness with a gap of 8 weeks or less in between. And the sickness itself doesn't need to be related. It's just the period of time in between them that makes them linked. And if you do have a linked period of sickness, you don't serve the waiting days again, but the sickness must still be 4 days or longer in that second spell of sickness in order to qualify for SSP. So the difference there is they would receive SSP for all of those days in the linked period, rather than having to serve those waiting days again. So you'll see some of this come to life as we do the demonstration. And we're now going to move on, and we're going to talk about recording sickness in Sage 50 Payroll. So we've given you a couple of options to record sickness in the software. You can do it via the absence diary, which is found in the employee record, which is where you would go to set this up, and also in the enter payment screen. Or you can set it up using the quick SSP screen, which allows you to enter all the details of the sickness in one place and print a summary of the sickness details. Now, the method that you use will be down to personal preference. I myself would probably use quick SSP to set up the payment initially, just so that everything can be done in one place. But then I find the absence diary is easier to record continuing sickness, as you can simply enter the next dates of sickness in your next period if the employee is off long term, and that can be done pretty quickly even from the enter payments screen. But we're going to show you both methods, and you can decide which one would suit you best. Now, whichever way you record the sickness, it's going to create some entries on the absence diary. So I just wanted to explain what the different symbols mean, and you'll see these when we go into the demonstration. So the first one is the letter X, and that would indicate a waiting day, so one of the first 3 qualifying days of sickness in a PIW. If it's in lowercase, it means it's sickness for a current period that hasn't yet been paid. If it's uppercase, if it's a capital letter, it's a waiting day in a historical period that has already been paid. The next symbol is a P, so that is a paid SSP day, and again, lowercase current, uppercase historical. There's a dash or an equal symbol for a non-qualifying day. So if the employee only works Monday to Friday, you'd see these symbols on the weekend. A red A indicates a sickness that is less than 4 days in a row, so it hasn't formed a PIW, doesn't qualify. And a W is sickness marked as SSP withheld. So this would appear after the 28 weeks have been paid, or if you've recorded sickness and you've ticked a box to say that you're withholding it for any other reason. So look out for these absence entries when we go into the demo. Now, what determines what is a qualifying day? Well, you'll need to set up a qualifying day pattern, and this will consist of N's indicating a non-qualifying day and Q's indicating a qualifying day. And those waiting days and paid SSP days would only be recorded on an employee's qualifying day according to their pattern. So once we've recorded the sickness, we're going to go into the enter payment screen, and this is where you can see the amount of SSP payable. It's calculated up to your process date. So like all statutory payments, it will not be calculated in advance. So only absence up to the process date will be included, and you can check the SSP payable and SSP weeks. And from here, you can add further sickness, you can edit the sickness dates, or you can delete current sickness entries as required. So that's your theory. Let's give you the demo on this. So I'm just going to bring these slides down. You'll see I'm already logged into Sage Payroll, and the first thing I'm going to do is set my process date. So my employees are paid on the last day of each month. So next pay date will be 31st of January. And this means that any sickness entries up to this date will be used in calculations of SSP. So let's start by setting up SSP within the employee record using the absence diary. So I'm going to start by opening the employee record for the first employee in this list. Then going to navigate to the absence tab here at the top. And before we record any absence dates, we're going to set up our qualifying day pattern. So to do this, under further information, I'm going to click SSP. And then from the statutory sick pay window, I'll click the qualifying days tab. Now you can see for this employee, there is already a working day pattern entered. This is a very common one, N, 5 Qs and then an N. And this indicates a working week of Monday to Friday, with the first N being a non-qualifying day on a Sunday, 5 Qs representing Monday to Friday, and another non-qualifying day on the Saturday. And if those are the working days every week, that pattern will repeat weekly, and it'll start from the pattern start date, which would be any Sunday before the absence begins. And for a weekly pattern that repeats every week, the pattern start date isn't really too important. If you find that it's a long way in the past, you might want to bring it a little bit up to date. So if you put any date in the pattern start date, it will choose the nearest Sunday to that date to be your pattern start date. But if you need to change this qualifying day pattern, you've got a few ways of doing this. You can either choose an alternative pattern from this list. So for example, pattern 4 here would be for an employee who works Monday through to Wednesday each week. Those will be your 3 qualifying days, with non-qualifying days on the other days. We've got a pattern at the bottom here where every day of the week would be a qualifying day. Or you can enter your own bespoke pattern, and it can last more than 1 week. So if there's a shift rotation, for example, an employee works for 3 days, then has 3 days off, and that repeats, you can build up a working day pattern by entering the relevant symbols. Moving on to the next line. And then you'll get the idea here. This one ends up being a 6-week pattern. And then it repeats like so. So that's a pattern representing a 6-week rota where you do 3 days on, 3 days off, with the first line of the pattern lining up with this pattern start date. So as you can see, the working day patterns can get quite complicated. And if the employee doesn't have set working days, maybe they're a casual employee, or you don't want to use a complicated shift pattern that has a number of weeks, what you can do alternatively, and this is according to HMRC's guidance, is you can agree a standard working pattern for SSP purposes. Now, often this will be based on days of the week that an employee could potentially work. So if your business opens 7 days a week, you might use a working day pattern where every day is a qualifying day. Or if you're a Monday to Friday business, you might use the Monday to Friday pattern as your standard pattern for SSP for employees that don't have contracted days. So we're just going to stick with this Monday to Friday for this employee. I've updated the pattern start date. I'm going to click OK and yes to continue. And this now means that our qualifying days and SSP days will only land on weekdays. So once you've got the pattern set up, your next step is to record the dates of sickness. So a couple of ways you can do it from the absence diary. You can click on the diary entry button here at the bottom. Set the absence type to SSP sickness, which is the default absence type that comes up. And then you can enter the dates from and to. So I'm going to enter from Monday the 15th through to Friday the 26th of January. You can enter your own comment, which will appear on any detailed SSP reports. And then if I click OK, you can see it's recorded the absence. And this is where we start to see the symbols. We've got 3 waiting days, 3 X's. The first 3 qualifying days are off sick. We've got the paid SSP days on the employee's working days thereafter. And we've got the 2 dashes, which are our non-qualifying days falling there on the weekend. So it's important to make the sickness continuous if the employee hasn't returned to work, so that you've always got 4 consecutive days or more in your period of incapacity for work. So that's now been recorded. If you need to delete any absence, as long as it's current absence, it's in lowercase, you can select it like so. So I've clicked and dragged to select that date range. You can right click and then select none. And then to put it back on, another way you could do it if you don't want to use diary entry is again to click and drag a date range, right click, go to SSP and select due to sickness. And that updates the absence diary like so. So we've set up the working day pattern, we've recorded the sickness, we can close out of that employee record, and as you'll see a little bit later on, it will automatically calculate the SSP. Now, I do want to quickly show you the other way of recording sickness, and this I would potentially use when setting it up for the first time, but then not necessarily for ongoing sickness. You'd probably find it easier to update the absence diary for ongoing sickness. But if you select an individual employee in your list, like I've done here, you should see a number of links appear just underneath your payroll tasks. And the one at the top is for recording sickness. If you don't see this links pane, it could be that you need to resize it like so, or alternatively go to your employee tasks. You'll find the same option on the left-hand side, recording sickness. And for this one, you're entering the same information, but you're just doing it on a single screen. So let's put some dates of sickness in for this employee. We can click Calculate Entitlement. It's going to show us the entitlement due here at the bottom of the screen. We can still set up our qualifying day pattern. So it shows you what the current pattern is, but if required, we can change it from here in the same way we did before. I'm going to leave this one as Monday to Friday. And then there is a print option when you go into Quick SSP, and it will print a summary of the information you're seeing on screen here. So just an alternative way of setting it up. I can click on to save and then close. And then if I go back into the employee record, you'll find that it's recorded the sickness for me. So I've still got the same symbols, waiting days, paid SSP days. We've got our non-qualifying days there as well. So once the sickness is entered, your next step is to go into the pay run. So I've already set my process date, and always keep in mind that it will calculate up to your process date. So a quick note, if you normally pay your employees in arrears, this usually applies to weekly paid employees. I'd recommend that when you record the absence, you record it for the period you would usually be paying them for, and that way you can pay your SSP in arrears as well. If I just go into enter payments for these two and go to the SSP/parental leave tab. See, for the first employee, we've got the same absence entries, but we've now got an amount of SSP payable. It's £153.16. We've got the SSP weeks. So although they're off for 2 weeks, it's 1.4 weeks of SSP because they need to serve the 3 waiting days. And then effectively, if you've got a 5-day week, 1 day of SSP is the weekly rate divided by 5. So that's why we've got 1.4 for a week and 2 days that is payable here. And if I just click Save Next to take us on to my next employee, we're seeing similar information. This time it's just 1 week. But if we needed to, we could add to that absence from here. So maybe they've returned for a couple of days, but they weren't quite right. They've taken another week off later on in the month. I can record that. And because it links, it's within 8 weeks, and it's more than 4 days in a row, they're not serving waiting days again. This is all linking together. We've got 2 weeks in total. And then again, if you want to remove current sickness, you can select it, right click, and choose none. So that's recording the sickness. Let's give you a very quick recap of those steps. So you can use the absence diary or the quick SSP option to set this up. Check the qualifying day pattern, record the dates of sickness. You'll see the absence diary entries, all in lowercase if it's current sickness. But you'll see once we complete payroll, it will become historical. And then we can edit or delete current sickness if required from the enter payment screen. And from the SSP parental leave tab, we're checking the SSP payable and your SSP weeks. So next up, I want to talk about adjusting your employees' payments. So once the sickness has been recorded, the SSP will calculate automatically, but you will need to make some adjustments to the employee's basic pay, or you'll end up paying them their full basic plus their SSP. And there are two different approaches you might take, and the one that you choose depends on whether or not you have a company sick pay scheme and you want to top up the SSP to your employee's normal basic. So these are quite common. I'll give you an example. Maybe there's a company sick pay scheme where 8 weeks of sickness are paid at full pay. And if that's the case for you and you want an employee to receive their usual wage, you can use the make up basic option to automatically adjust their basic by the amount of statutory pay calculated. So the way this works is you enter the amount you want them to receive in total. So you put the total gross pay on the payments tab as a standard payment. And then from the summary tab, you would click the make up basic button. If you don't have a company sick pay scheme, or if company sick pay has run out, you can do your adjustment manually. So this will involve working out how much you want to pay the employee for the days or hours they've worked, entering this amount, and then the SSP will be paid on top of that. So let's have a look at both of these in the demo, just bringing these slides down again. So I've still got my 2 employees that have been off sick selected. I'm going to go back into the enter payment screen. You'll see for the first employee, I already have their monthly salary entered. So they get £2,000 gross per month. And for this employee, I'm going to use make up basic because they are still within the period where they're covered by our company sick pay scheme. So I'm just going to top up the statutory sick pay to their full basic amount. Now to do this, you go to the summary tab where you'll see the statutory sick pay amount and the full pre-tax payments. So this is the amount we're making up to. I would click make up basic at the bottom down here. You'll then see this prompt asking you to make an adjustment to one of your payments. So it is the hours or number value that will be adjusted, in this case for the salary payment. So if that is the correct payment, we click yes to continue. And you'll see that the pre-tax payment has reduced by £153.16, leaving the employee with their normal gross pay for the month of £2,000. And the way that it's done that, if I just take you back to the payments tab, as it's made an adjustment to the hours or number value, thereby reducing the amount. So if this employee was off sick next month and they're still within the company sick pay entitlement, we can repeat the steps. So always start by entering the full amount you want them to receive. And then next month, whatever the SSP amount is, we can make up basic to automatically adjust the salary like so. So that's make up basic for those of your employees that have a company scheme. Now for the other one, let's assume for this employee we don't have a company sick pay scheme. So we've got a week of SSP payable, taking into account those 3 waiting days. And for this one, we just want to manually calculate the basic pay to pay them for the days they actually worked. So for this one, by my calculations, they will have done 15 working days in January. So I want to pay them for those 15 days they've worked, but not for those 8 days, which is covered by a week of SSP. So you'll have your own method of manually calculating their part period salary. So the way I'm going to do it is just divide the number of days they've worked by the number of working days in the month. So it's 15 I want to pay them for out of 23 days. That'll reduce their salary. And then on top of that, they're getting their week of statutory sick pay. It's considerably less than what they would get paid in wages. And as such, their total gross pay is lower as a result. So SSP for those 8 days, and I've manually calculated what I want to pay them for the other 15. But you might have your own method of calculating part period salary. So once you've made these adjustments, SSP information will appear on your pre-update reports. So if I just select everyone and go into my pre-update reports, I'll show you the pay slips first. So a couple of standard pay slips here. We've got the salary, well, we made up to basic in this case, and statutory payments always have their own payment line. So this is the amount of statutory sick pay. This first employee is still getting their £2,000. And then the second employee, we did this adjustment manually. We calculated what we wanted to pay them for the days they've worked, and their statutory sick pay for that period of absence appears just here. So their earnings for the month, just over £1,400. You'll also find SSP information on the payment summary part 1 report. So we have a column for statutory sick pay, as well as statutory parental payments. Helps you keep track of the SSP that you have paid. And then once you've got all your pay slips and reports, and you complete your payroll by updating records, which I'm going to do just now. Obviously, you'd be taking your backup at this point as well. Once that's complete, if we just take a look at these 2 employees again, you'll see that the absence entries are now uppercase. So this is now historical sickness. Exactly the same for my second employee. And if you were to view the further information at the bottom here, we now have a previous PIW. So these records are used to determine if the next sickness is linked. So it shows us the start and end date, etc., for that previous sickness. So this is a good screen for troubleshooting, as you'll see a little bit later on. So we're now ready to run our next pay run. And if there is further sickness to record, because we've already checked the working pattern, etc., for these employees, what we could do is we can go into Enter Payments, click on the SSP Parental Leave tab, and then we can either extend the sickness if it's continuous. So I've very quickly there added another 2 weeks directly after the previous sickness. So maybe this was up to my payroll cutoff. You can see it's calculated 2 weeks in the current period. And if I'm making up to basic again, they're still within that 8 week, whatever your company sick pay policy is, put the full wage in, make up to basic, and it will do the adjustment based on the next month's SSP. So that was adjusting your employees' payments, as you've seen there, either make up basic or adjusting those payments manually. So one last section in the presentation before we go into our little quiz, and this is all around troubleshooting SSP. So you might have recorded some sickness and you've noticed that either no SSP is calculating or the amount of SSP doesn't quite look right. So I've put together the top five areas to check to help you get to the bottom of what is going on. So these are 5 areas to check if you're troubleshooting SSP. So item number 1 is to check your process date. Make sure you've entered the correct process date. So this would be the date your employees are paid. And keep in mind that SSP is paid up to and including that date. So it's always paid in arrears. Can't be paid for future dates. So if you've got the wrong process date set, simply changing that to the correct one should fix the issue. Next thing to check are the symbols on the diary. So what symbols appear? We're looking for lowercase letters for the current period. If it's just started, you'd have 3 waiting days, and you would have paid SSP days appearing with a P. Third thing to check are the qualifying days. So if the amount doesn't quite look right at the start of a sickness, it could be the wrong working pattern is assigned. If there's none calculated at all, it could be down to average earnings. So check the average earnings. Show you where you can do that. It needs to be above £123 a week to qualify. And if it's none of those first 4, next thing to check in terms of troubleshooting is the previous PIW information. So are the details shown there correct? Do they reflect what has been previously paid? Have they perhaps come to the end of a long-term sickness, where they've exhausted their 28 weeks of entitlement. So a couple of quick examples of some troubleshooting. I've set my next pay date, got a couple of employees off sick, employees 6 and 8. When I go into the enter payment screen for them, and I go to check their absence, this was a bit lower than I was expecting. It's only paying 2 weeks of SSP, where usually they get 4 or so. And the reason for this one, as indicated by these pink W's, is that the employee has now reached the 28-week limit. So it's being withheld from this point. Another place you could check this is if you go into the employee record, absence, and then SSP. You've got a previous PIW tab, and we can see there were 26 weeks previously paid. So we only have 2 more weeks to pay. So that's an employee where it's been withheld automatically. And next one, employee 8. So I've recorded a week of sickness, starting on the Thursday, ending on the Wednesday. But the absence diary symbols are the letter A, a red A. And the problem here is I have not recorded continuous sickness. I've not included the weekend in that spell of sickness. So according to the system, they've not been off for 4 or more days in a row. And that's what that red A signifies, an absence that's less than 4 working days, sorry, 4 days in a row. Or sometimes it can be if you've got a future working day pattern. So your pattern start date is in the future. So this one's really easy to fix. Just need to record the missing days in that spell of sickness. And then they're off for a week. They've still got the 3 waiting days, but we've then got 2 days of SSP payable. So just a couple of examples of a bit of troubleshooting there for you. So that's about it for the presentation, and it brings us on to arguably the fun bit of the session. So a bit of a knowledge check, 4 multiple choice questions for you to join in. We're going to use the polling feature to do this and give you about a minute on each of the questions. So do feel free to join in, and we will launch our first question, which is, what is the weekly rate of SSP for the current tax year? So what is the weekly rate of SSP in 2023 to 24? Is it £99.35 per week? Is it £109.40 per week? Or is it £172.48? So to vote in the poll, just click the answer on screen and submit it through. I'll show you how you've got on by sharing the overall percentages. It's looking pretty good so far, I must say. And we'll give you about a minute to cast your vote. Great, so just about 80% of the vote in. Let's close that down and share the results. And I'm happy to see that 98% of you got the answer right. This year's weekly rate of SSP is £109.40. If you said £99.35, that was last year's rate, and the £172.48 is the rate of statutory parental pay. So I just threw those in to put you off. It didn't fool most of you. So good work on that first question. On to question 2. How many consecutive days does an employee need to be off sick in order to form a period of incapacity for work, a PIW? So how many days in a row does an employee need to be off sick to form a PIW? Is it 3 days? Is it just 1 day? Or is it 4 days? So vote in the poll and send your answers through. So again, we're just ticking over to 80% of you voted. So we're going to close that one down. And let's see how you got on. So again, we have a runaway leader here. 86% of you are saying 4 consecutive days, and that is the correct answer. So 4 days in a row forms a PIW. The first 3 days of sickness are the waiting days. So those are the days where SSP is not payable. kicks in from the 4th day an employee is off sick. And we had 2% saying 1 day. Under current SSP rules, does need to be 4 days or more in a row to qualify. So well done to the 86% who got that one right. On to question 3. Okay, so this one is about linked PIWs. What is the maximum number of weeks between 2 PIWs for the periods to be classed as linked? So would they be linked if there is up to 39 weeks between them? Is it 52 weeks? Is it 8 weeks? Or is it 12 weeks? So what is the maximum number of weeks between 2 PIWs for the periods to be classed as linked? So got some good answers coming in here. Just had a minute, so we will close that down and share the results. So 95% of you this time got the answer right. It is 8 weeks between PIWs for them to be linked. Any more than that, and you start a new PIW, you serve the waiting days again, and you start counting from week 1 up to that 28-week limit. So yeah, sickness with less than 8 weeks between them is linked. And the last question for you, this one's about the absence diary. So which of the following symbols represents a waiting day on the absence diary? 4 possible answers for this one. So is it the letter A? Is it a P? Is it an X? Or is it a W? So which of those letters or symbols represents a waiting day on the absence diary? And with just over 75% of the vote in, we will close that one down. Looks like we've caught a few of you out on this one. So these are results. 78% of you saying X for a waiting day, and you 78% are correct. So X's are the waiting days, P's are the paid SSP days, W is withheld SSP. So if you've paid the 28 weeks, the diary entries appear as a pink W for withheld, and A is a sickness lasting less than 4 days in a row. So some good answers in that poll. Thanks for joining in if you got the chance there. And well done to those of you that got 4 out of 4. And that actually brings us to the end of the presentation. So we are going to stick around for 5 minutes or so just to try and get through as many of your questions as possible. But if you do think of a question after you leave the webinar today, I'd like to tell you about where you can find further support. So a great place for you to go is our online help centre, sage.co.uk/help. It can also be accessed from any of the help icons within Sage 50 Payroll. Once you're on the Sage 50 Payroll Help Centre, you'll find some support guides. So the absences support guide will cover all of the statutory payments. You can also search our knowledge base. You can check out the upcoming webinars by clicking the webinars link at the top of the screen. You can watch our videos and you can get in touch with the support team if you do need their assistance. You'll find all the contact details on the Help Centre. So you go onto that, any device or browser, or from within Payroll, got your own in-product version by clicking the help icons. Also want to let you know about Sage University at sageu.com. From here, you can register with a free profile and you can complete our e-learning courses for Sage 50 Payroll. We have online certification as well as bite-sized learning. So an excellent learning resource for you available at sageu.com. So that brings us to final questions. We're going to answer these in the Q&A section on the right hand side of your screen. So we'll try and get through as many as possible. If you want to grab a copy of the handouts, they are still available to download from the handouts area. If you are leaving us now, thanks for attending the webinar. We will be sending you a follow-up email with links to upcoming webinars, and also to a recording of today's session if you want to watch any of this back. And we'll be adding the recording to our recordings guide in our help center as well. When you exit, if you see a short survey appear, very much appreciate any feedback that you might have on today's session, as it really does help us to improve the webinars moving forward. Any thoughts on other topics that you might want to see, do shout up as well. So I'm just going to go on to mute briefly, help the guys out with some of the questions, and we'll come back to you when we are ready to wrap up. I'll speak to you soon. Hi everyone, and thanks for sticking with us there. I appreciate we are slightly over the time we have allocated. You've been keeping us busy with the questions, so we're just getting the final answers out to the last few that have come in. So thanks so much for sending those through. I hope the answers have been useful to you. We will be shortly closing the webinar, and as we exit, you may be prompted to complete a short exit survey. So I'd really appreciate you spending a moment to do that if you could. Look out for a follow-up email that we'll be sending you later today, which includes links to register for our future webinars and a link to watch the recording of today's session. So as we are over time now, we're going to wrap things up. So thanks once again, everyone, for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your week. Maybe we'll see you on some of our other webinars in the future. So goodbye for now.